Hey there. So I wanted to make a distinction about something that I've been talking about, and that is the distinction between when we want to integrate something, like take it into us as our own, and when we want to ignore something and not put our focus on it. But first, let's talk about why I do all this. My spiritual journey began at a time when I was pretty devastated and very much in suffering, and had been for many years, with mental health issues. I lit a candle for us, by the way. I'm just going to put it over here. I had a soul contract with somebody who introduced me to the documentary called The Secret. It's interesting because his job for our soul contract was to introduce me to The Secret. And we were chat buddies at the time. I was agoraphobic. I didn't leave my house. So I had online friends, supportive people here and there. And this particular one was somebody who was very depressed. And I remember distinctly him sharing this documentary with me. And I just kind of went, oh, cool, thanks, I'll look into it. And then I didn't for like 2 years. 2 years later, same person pops back up into my chats, mentions the same documentary. And I remember that he had told me that before. This time I end up looking at it. I end up watching it. This time I was more desperate than ever because I was so uncomfortable in my own body, where I had anxiety so bad that I thought about killing myself on a daily basis just to escape the discomfort. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't feel comfortable at any moment of any waking hour or minute. It was pretty torturous. I was on a lot of psychiatric medication at the time to try to dull out that discomfort. And frankly, life was just too overwhelming at that time for me because I didn't have any solutions to any of the issues that I was suffering from, which now I know was trauma. And I was in counseling. I had a counselor for many years, from the time I was 15 to my late 30s. I had counselors, many of them. And I would give them the credit for, maybe keeping me going that long, because they would put me on different medications, give me hope that they would work. I would get the placebo effect from the medication for a short time, and then that would wear off, and I would be back into my original state of devastation. Went so far as to me being hospitalized, and me also subjecting myself to 12 rounds of electric shock therapy, which doesn't surprise you if you've read my website. I must say, it's a very awful way to try and solve the issue. But I was pretty desperate because every solution I had been offered to that point had failed, and I really couldn't bear it, living in that state. So eventually I, one step at a time, learned enough that a few years down the road, after watching The Secret, I was in a much different place. Now I had something to do. That something to do was to learn about myself, to figure out how I could be happy, And I had enough information, and it was spiritual things like the law of attraction that got me enough hope that I started taking steps to help myself. At one point, I came across astrology on a much deeper level than I had before. I had previously used astrology to look up my compatibility with men. So I had done that for many years, but I would just use a free site that did the calculations for me. So I didn't learn a lot about astrology until later. But when I looked at my own astrology, it revealed my spirituality. And at the time, I didn't consider myself very spiritual at all. I was puzzled by the idea that I would be so spiritual, shown in my chart. But I eventually became open to it because what I realize now is spirituality, becoming aware that there was more than just what I was living, is really what opened me to why I'm here on earth. I can remember one time specifically I did a meditation, and the meditation was meant to guide me into knowing my life's purpose. I believe Teal Swan was the facilitator of the meditation. I have no idea which one it was of hers. I mean, we're talking about more than 10 years ago. Yeah. And the answer for me, the reason that I'm here, is freedom. And I had no idea what that meant even, but I knew it was true when it was revealed to me. I knew it was true. I said, yes, that's it, it's freedom. I wouldn't have thought that was true. I was so codependent at the time, I just wanted to be loved. I was seeking love in everything I did throughout life, whether it was people-pleasing, trying to save people. It was all about wanting to be loved, so I would have thought that was my purpose. But that was one of my shadows because of all the misunderstandings I held in my energy body. But when I realized it was freedom, I knew it was true, and so I've known that for about 10 years. And since then, I've come to realize and understand what freedom is. And perhaps freedom is something that is individual to each of us. But to me, freedom is feeling comfortable in my own skin. Freedom is not wearing a mask, not having to pretend I'm something I'm not having to do something in order to make someone like me, not having to be scared about what people have to say about me behind my back, not feeling burdened by others' opinions or expectations, not worried that I won't live up to other people's expectations or some outer defined level of success. Freedom is knowing myself. Freedom is knowing my ability to create. Freedom is being comfortable in my own skin. Freedom is knowing that I have a choice, that my choice matters, that my choice is everything. Freedom is understanding what's important to me and knowing that that can change. Freedom is feeling confident enough in my ability to be of value. Freedom is having confidence in my worth, in my value, in my enjoyment of life. Freedom is spending time with my grandchildren. Freedom is achieving my goals. Freedom is knowing that I am not separate from others. Freedom is not holding grudges against other people or their decisions or what they do or how they live. If you watched my last video, you might know that I expressed how I was feeling burdened by this idea that others weren't aware that they could help themselves or change their views. And to me, holding that as a burden for myself is not freedom. So I've let that go, because I know freedom is knowing I can let that go. Freedom is being okay with other people living how they want to live. Freedom is not having to prove anything to anyone. Freedom is getting back up when I fall down. Freedom is the ability to make a mistake and be okay with it. Freedom is making mistakes. Freedom is stepping on toes. Freedom is stubbing my own toe. Freedom is not knowing. So why do I share information about integrating the shadow? Well, first of all, what is the shadow? The shadow is the part of us that's operating below the level of awareness that keeps us in reactive states. Freedom is being free of reactions. Having the space and the grace to choose how I respond. So when we find ourselves in a reactive state, and we've noticed there's a pattern of that same reaction, that is a good indication that it's anchored into us in our shadow, in our subconscious, below our level of awareness. When it's just become into our awareness, here's the first step of healing. We notice the pattern. That's when we know we have something to heal. Now, recently, I also expressed that I had come down with a need to rest as my body processed through some pretty serious symptoms. And I expressed how I don't own illness. And I thought when I was expressing that, maybe there would be people who watched that didn't understand why I generally say integrate everything, take it in as your own. Because if it was your shadow, you want to own it as your shadow before you heal it. But when it's illness, it's not a pattern, right? Unless it's a pattern within your own energetic body, don't treat it like it's yours. If it's a passing through thought, you don't have to grab onto it. It's the ones that won't go away. It's the ones that are anchored into you with some sort of repetitive, looping pattern that you want to do a little bit of work and balance out the energy before you accept and love yourself through anything that arises with it, and then let it go. So what you've done is you've built your immunity to that thing. So you've integrated that thing as I have an immunity to being stuck in that anymore. Now it can go. The next time you were faced with that thing, it would no longer be a pattern, and you'd feel that you have a choice now. You're not just reacting. So in the case of me kind of getting my body run down, and coming down with some symptoms that I had to rest through, the reason why I wouldn't integrate that is because that's not a pattern for me. It's not like I chronically have that issue. That is not something that kept resurfacing. That was a genuine need to rest, and as I rested, there was no need for me to tell my body that we were in a sick state or anything, because what we believe and what we manifest and say to ourselves is what we will live out. You know, we have control. We have the freedom to create the reality that we want to experience. And we have the freedom to respond to the reality that we are currently in. And we have the freedom to change what we're anchored to in that reality. What we put our focus on really matters. So that's why I would not say to put focus on illness, but I would say to put focus on a pattern of illness if we had it, right? Like if I stub my toe, that's just a thing that happened. But if I stub my toe every day for like a week, okay, I might want to look at what this is correlating to. Where am I tripping myself in my thoughts? When has this happened before? What do I feel when this happens? You know, because it's a pattern that gives me something to look at and learn from, and maybe like clear up a misunderstanding that I have about my own self and the way I'm living life. Maybe there was a stuck thought in my subconscious that I hadn't even noticed anymore, that I was like klutzy or something, you know, clumsy. And maybe it's like, oh, now that it's time to heal that, we're going to bring it to your attention. You know, the universe will bring it up for me to realize the pattern when it's ready for me to rectify the misunderstanding I've held about it. Simple as that. Otherwise, a random reason to rest when the body is processing through energy, that is just what needs to happen sometimes, right? When you've rectified a bunch of your misunderstandings, your body has to catch up to that as well, right? Your body has to shake out all that energy that is no longer for it. Your body has to rebuild its structure and cells and be ready to house the new understanding that you have, and be stable, you know, really stabilize in what you've learned, the wisdom gained from all the experiences that you've integrated. So that's what I wanted to share. I wanted to share about the important distinction of what may have seemed like contradictive information that I was talking about. Sometimes I'm speaking as if you know what I'm talking about. And then, you know, if I get like a stream of energy where someone doesn't understand, you know, it doesn't have to be now, you know, maybe when it's watched in the future or whatever, that will inspire me to elaborate sometimes, right? So that's why I've decided to make that distinction, because I want to be accurate and I want to be thorough, and I don't want to leave somebody more confused. But I also trust that if somebody is drawn to a certain video and I'm saying something without the bigger picture clarification that I've just given in this video, that what they have been presented with to reflect on is the most helpful thing to them at that time. Because it is my intention in every video that only those who would be assisted by it in some way, who would find it helpful or valuable to reflect on, would be drawn to the video. And I've had a couple experiments along the way with different intentions on different videos, but that has been my intention overall now at this time. So if anyone had found themselves confused, I don't think I think that they would have spoken up or found their answer elsewhere, or found their way to this video where I can clarify that. So cheers to freedom, right? I'm really thankful for the whole journey that I've had, for, you know, the first steps of learning about the law of attraction were very vital to my journey. But I did learn later that there's a lot more to understand about it. It's not just as simple as think something and then it will be true for you. There's a lot more, especially the fact that we have our shadow and we have soul's intentions that are all going to play into it as well. And none of it's wrong, right? The whole process is a nice, beautiful journey. But like, if I didn't even know that it was a possibility, like if I hadn't been struck with the idea that it was possible to think something different and have a different result, then I wouldn't have tried, and I wouldn't have changed my life. So I'm so grateful for it. I feel like what I did was the equivalent of like drudging myself up from the hell realms. And even after I did that, I came to a point where I was very much light and free based on what I was focusing on. And then I still had to descend back into the hell realms, so to speak, to dissect my shadow. Because I, in this lifetime, took on the responsibility of rectifying loops that I had left unfinished from other lifetimes. So, hence dredging back down in the hell realms and coming back up again. And what a beautiful process, what a nice group of people that I've had the pleasure of playing these things out with. I appreciate every soul who played the part, whether it was a part of the someone I projected on as the mean one or the bad guy or whatever, until I could fully integrate the shadow loop in myself, or if it was somebody who actually acted as like an earth angel in the way that they helped me or gave me an answer, or just some sort of assistance along the way. It's all been so valuable and useful to me, and I really appreciate the whole journey thus far. And I think that there's a lot to say about being in gratitude. And I knew that even back then when I started this process 10 years ago. I started small, but I started practicing being grateful to help change my thoughts around, because my thoughts were very negative. And now it's much easier. I don't think in negative terms very often. It would surprise me if I found a negative thought pattern within myself, because I am so practiced now, after many years of changing the direction of how I think, dissecting each thought, making sure that I was only thinking the thoughts of things that I would want to live out, that I feel very clued in, to what I'm thinking. And even when somebody else is sharing their thoughts and they're sharing that they think very negatively, I pick up on it very easily and can understand that it's correlating to the life that they're living and see that. So it's not always, that it's not always comfortable, but it is what it is, right? Like, having this information means that doesn't mean I can control other people or that I can recruit other people to do it for themselves. They're on their own journey. They're at their own pace. They have their own steps that they meant to take on this journey. And so the only thing I can do is hold space for them to figure it out if and when they're meant to. And if they ask, then of course I can assist. But if they don't ask me, then, there's nothing else for me to do with it. So, there's no reason for me to be burdened by people who are still in suffering and not aware that they can free themselves. That probably was just another little part of me that doesn't want to see people in suffering, it's difficult to see someone in suffering. And especially when you know how to get out of that suffering, you know how it could be solved, but they won't do what you know how to do to solve it. It's just like, well, that's not their path then. If they're not asking that question of me, and that's something I can solve, there's nothing that I could possibly do except for hold space for them, except for be compassionate for that, right? How many times did someone think that they knew better for me than I knew for myself? And how many times did I still have to make the mistake myself instead of taking their advice? Well, when I was a teenager, many times. Many times I had to make the mistake for myself, you know? So I can have compassion for anyone who's in that position where they're not willing or able to ask for assistance or help or the answer or a solution or an idea, you know? I get it totally. And also, it doesn't mean that they won't get there. I absolutely believe that they'll get there the way that they're meant to, how they're meant to. And for all I know, they could be on the path they're on, being led to a genius solution that hasn't even existed yet, that will change the course of people's lives, you know, on a whole. So I wouldn't want to interrupt anybody who's on their own path and not specifically asking me for assistance. So I'll take the weight of the world off my shoulders by realizing that, and continue back into my much loved, much appreciated, hard-earned freedom. Yeah. May you all be enjoying your freedom too.